Mr. President, thank you very much, and I want to add my voice to recognizing what an important day it is here. I want to thank the senator from Alabama and Mississippi, of course, my good friend Senator Murkowski, and many other senators, Senator from California, Iowa, all came down this floor already today to talk about this great American, this great Alaskan. You know, Mr. President, I try to come down the floor about once a week, and I do a speech, what I call the Alaskan of the Week, to talk about an Alaskan who's done great stuff for our state, their community, the country. But as Senator Murkowski just mentioned in her remarks, I'm literally able to now talk about the Alaskan of the century. That's right, Mr. President, the state of Alaska legislature voted that Ted Stevens was the Alaskan of the century for reasons that we're all talking about today. So I just want to add a few more words about this legendary U.S. Senator whose portrait we are unveiling today. And let me say, Mr. President, it's more than fitting that we have a portrait of Senator Stevens in the halls of Congress. It's a small tribute compared to the magnitude of his contributions to our country and to our state, and yet in so many ways it's proper and fitting because his spirit certainly remains in this body. It's an example of leadership and public service that you hear and I hear, and I know Senator Murkowski hears all the time, how so many of my colleagues still talk about Senator Stevens and what he meant, just like my good friend, the senator from Alabama, and so many others. So, Mr. President, I'll just give a little more color to this great man's life. He was born in Indiana in 1923. When he was a young boy, the Great Depression hit. Senator Stevens supported his family by selling newspapers on the street, and after the untimely death of his father, he moved to California to live with an aunt and uncle where he learned to kind of relax and to surf. The surfboard that he learned to surf on stayed with him in his office until the end. And as was already mentioned, Mr. President, he was, of course, a part of America's greatest generation, a pilot, 14th Army Air Corps, flying supplies to General Chennault's Flying Tigers over the hump, India, China, Burma, very dangerous missions. And in 1953, armed with a law degree from Harvard, he made his way to then the territory of Alaska, where he found, in his words, quote, "the passion of my career, the Alaska dream." So what was this dream of Ted Stevens? A dream of an Alaska with promises of the 21st century springing up from the Arctic, he said. An Alaska where our federal government works with us, not against us, to achieve our destiny, to develop our resources and our economy for the benefit of all Alaskans, but also for the benefit of all Americans. An Alaska that lives up to the potential the Congress of the United States saw when it voted to allow Alaska to become the 49th state. Senator Stevens worked tirelessly for these dreams. And in the last speech he gave on this floor of the United States Senate, he recounted some of his successes. He said, quote, "Where there was nothing but tundra and forests, today there are now airports, roads, ports, water and sewer systems, hospitals, clinics, communications networks, research labs, and much, much more." He went on to say, Alaska was not Seward's folly and is no longer an impoverished territory. Alaska is a great state and an essential contributor to our nation's energy security and national defense. In that speech, he said he was proud to have had a role in that transformation of Alaska. Now, Mr. President, I think we're all realizing in that speech, Senator Stevens was being very humble. He just didn't have a role. He played the lead role. Indeed, everywhere any Alaskan goes across the state, as Senator Murkowski has already stated, you see signs of his hard work, his dedication to this Alaskan dream, and the critical role he played in transforming our great state. But I think many of us, and we've already heard it being talked about today, also see his hard work in the friendships and example he set here in the United States Senate. Friendships not based on party labels, but on a commitment to service. As I mentioned, I have members of this body still approach me on a regular basis, like Senator Shelby, saying what an impact Senator Stevens had. His friendships were, of course, legendary. Scoop Jackson, Henry Magnuson, Pat Roberts, John Warner, Senator Shelby, Senator Leahy, Senator Biden, who was vice president, traveled to Anchorage to speak at Ted Stevens' funeral. And of course, as Senator Murkowski mentioned, his famous, enduring friendship with Hawaii's Daniel Inouye. And Senator Murkowski also mentioned his famous motto, "To hell with politics, just do what's right for Alaska." As a matter of fact, Mr. President, I happen to be wearing a very special pair of cufflinks that once belonged to Ted Stevens that has that very motto on these cufflinks. And when we're doing important stuff, I'll wear these on the floor to remind me, and I think all of us, what's important not just for our states, but for our country. And it was already noted, it wasn't just Alaska that he focused on and achieved so many great results for. It was our nation, whether national security, strengthening our military, taking care of our veterans through improved pay and benefits. As Senator Murkowski mentioned, modernizing our fishing industry, our telecommunication industry, being known as the Title IX father of that important legislation, making sure young girls have the opportunity to play sports. If you're an American and you have daughters, I have 3, and they're playing sports right now, guess who had so much to do with that? The late, great Senator Stevens. He also was, in many ways, the senator who cared more about the Olympics and focused on them than any other senator. Mr. President, one other thing about Senator Stevens. No matter how far he rose, and we're hearing about the high levels in the Senate he attained, he never forgot what was most important: serving the people of Alaska. When people, our constituents, traveled thousands of miles to come to D.C., he always made time for them. Thousands and thousands of Alaskans have notes from him, congratulatory letters, condolences letters, letters of appreciation. At his standing room only funeral in Anchorage, where I had the honor of serving as an honorary pallbearer, someone asked a show of hands of the audience, hundreds and hundreds of people, how many had received a letter from Senator Ted Stevens. Nearly every person at that service raised their hand. And of course, he treated his staff like family. If you work for Senator Stevens, like my wife Julie did, you were always part of that family, and you could always expect loyalty from him the rest of your life. Mr. President, these principles, relentless focus on Alaska, fighting the feds if you must, working across the aisle for the betterment of Alaska and America, maintaining a strong military and national defense, and deep, deep reverence for our veterans and fellow Alaskans are a key part of the Stevens legacy. I am deeply honored to serve in the Senate seat that Senator Stevens held for over 40 years and to literally sit in the same desk right here, this desk, that he used in the Senate. More important, I try to live by and serve my constituents according to these principles and the example he set for Alaska and America. But here's something else that's really, really so remarkable about Ted Stevens. I said I try to serve in that example, but you're already hearing on the Senate floor so many other senators have said that and believe that too. And that is really, really remarkable, Mr. President, and shows how much influence he still has in this body to this day. Mr. President, like most senators, I try to get home every weekend. Senator Murkowski and I just have a little further to go than most. Well, actually a lot further than most. And our state recently dedicated a wonderful statue of Ted Stevens in the Ted Stevens International Airport. It is life-size. He is sitting on a bench with an inviting smile, cowboy boots on, and his briefcase nearby, and it's right in the middle of the airport in Anchorage. I often walk by it, touch it, and quietly say, "How are we doing?" It gives me inspiration and strength and peace to do that. And with the unveiling of the official portrait of Ted Stevens today and its placement permanently in the halls of the U.S. Senate, I'll have another image of this great Alaskan and this great American from which to draw inspiration, but I think so many other senators will as well. So congratulations, especially to the family of Ted Stevens, Catherine, his wonderful wife, his children Ben, Walter, Ted Jr., Susan, Lily, and Beth, who is with us in spirit, as are so many other Alaskans and others who had such deep respect for Senator Stevens, and to his wonderful grandchildren, many of whom Julie and I have known and have watched grow up with pride since they were born. I yield the floor.